Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of Geeking Out. I'm your host, Adriana Villela, coming to you live from Toronto, Canada, to talk to two past guests about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, which is observability. And specifically, we are going to ask the question today, can observability be extended beyond the traditional confines of technology? So without further ado, let's bring on our two guests, Tim Banks and Marino Wijay. Hello.
Hello, everyone. You're muted, Tim.
Of course I'm muted because I was like, let me just make sure I mute so I can like cough, sneeze, whatever like that before the thing starts, and then thing starts, and like then I'm not there.
That's a great way to start a live stream with light humor. Awesome. Well, why don't we start off by having you both introduce yourselves? We'll start with Tim.
My name is Tim Banks. I am a customer solutions architect at Calent. I come from an extensive, almost 30-year background, apparently, of not engineering, but yet still somehow managing to work at various companies that hired me for engineering. But also I am a competitive Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. I hold 5 consecutive Pan American championships in my division, 3 American national championships, and 3 silver medals in the world championships.
So, moral of the story: do not fuck with Tim.
I mean, you know. Oh, is this a you know, uncensored version of the show?
Oh yeah. Geeking Out is uncensored, so like,
okay,
yeah.
You know, I always got to check the
live
stream.
We're bringing our full selves, and my full self includes all the all the swear words, potty mouth. And with that, I'll allow Marino to introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marino Wijay. I am a Canadian who tends to go to Costco a lot on Sunday mornings when everyone else is there. It's such a pleasure. You know, I roll up into the store with the cart and, we're all fighting for the same thing, to get to the front of that checkout line. But anyways, I am a solutions architect at a company called Kong. I focus in on things like service mesh and API gateways. And I spent a lot of time in the networking world. And this webinar is really important to me because before this ideology of open telemetry came about, we were doing observability, but in pieces, in very broken pieces, and in very inconsistent ways. So I'm happy to be here. I'm a motorcyclist. I climb because of Adriana.
Yes.
And yeah, I just chill out a lot, but happy to be here. Let's get right into it, I guess.
Awesome. And I'm going to add, by the way, that while you do Costco on Sundays, I have been to Costco once in my life.
Oh, no.
For real. And it scared the shit out of me.
Like, please tell me you at least went and got a hot dog and a slice of pizza.
No.
Oh my gosh.
I did not. I went with a guy I was dating at the time, and he was like,
you went on a date to Costco? What?
No, not on a date. Come on.
Okay, wait. I've been on Costco dates, and they are a lot of fun. You can tell a lot about a person on a Costco date.
Okay.
It's true. I'm saying. Plus, the food is cheap and it's pretty good.
No, but it was not as a date. We went to buy, I don't know what, water shoes, I think, because we were going to go to a water park. I don't remember. Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, that was my Costco experience. I was thoroughly disturbed and traumatized. And I'm like, never again.
You absolutely do need to go there and get a hot dog and a piece of pizza.
So I'm told. You
need to get a hot dog, a slice of pizza, and you need to roll your hot dog inside of that slice of pizza and eat it. And there you go.
Okay.
You don't need to do that,
but
I mean, it's just
the ice cream and like the little smoothie, like kind of Sundays situation they have going after is actually pretty good too, especially for the money. Like it is. Your whole pizza's like $9 or something like that there.
Damn. What's that in like Canadian dollars? It's probably
like $1 million.
It's like I think it's like 427 Canadian pesos or something like that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, our poor dollar is like dying.
Also happy Cinco de Mayo, everybody.
Oh yeah, happy Cinco de Mayo.
Well, to most everybody. Do y'all know what Cinco de Mayo celebrates?
I do not.
Tell us.
Yeah.
So, contrary to popular belief, it is not Mexican Independence Day. Cinco de Mayo celebrates the defeat of the French.
Ooh.
As we should all celebrate.
Interesting.
Yeah,
and you have Mexican roots, right?
I am half Mexican. So my mother is Mexican. Cool. I am the only member of like my mom, my sister, and me. They were both born in El Paso, Texas. I was born in Virginia and then came back to Texas. They both still live in Virginia. But my mom's whole side of the family is indigenous Mexican. So we're brown Mexicans. You go do the ancestral studies. We have been in the Chihuahua, Sonoran Desert area for thousands of years. So
that is super cool. Well, I would love to continue talking about all this fun stuff, but let's get on to the other fun stuff, which is the topic at hand. And by the way, for folks joining on LinkedIn and YouTube, please say hello and tell us where you're calling from. And also, if you have any questions, post them on the chat and we'll do our best to answer them towards the end of the show. Okay, so for starters, so we are going to talk about taking observability beyond, the confines of traditional tech. But I think it's always good to do a level set definition of observability. So who would like to take a stab?
Can we bring Hazel on to define that?
Should have done that actually. Yeah, because I feel like we're going to poach her definition, which is my favorite definition.
It is a great one.
It is. Tim, would you like to do the honors?
I'm going to have to pull it up verbatim so that I get it correct here.
I'm going to also find the slide deck that Marino and I used for our talk, so I can
that's exactly where I was headed.
So for the definition that Hazel gives, which is great, it has two main definitions. The first comes from control theory, and second comes from system engineering. She talks about the first definition about being, Hazel's definition. Observability is a process through which one develops the ability to ask meaningful questions, get useful answers, and act effectively on what you learn.
Yes. And I am doing a terrible job of, here we go. I'm going to put up the definition. Ta-da! Yeah, and I think it's such a great definition because I think it really encompasses everything that observability is and ought to be, what we expect to get out of it, right? It's not just about understanding your system, but like acting on that. And I think that's super, super important. So.
Well,
all right.
I think the important part about this is that it is very use case agnostic. It has no mentions of metrics. It has no mentions of processes, systems, applications, nothing, right? Observability can be something as simple as me asking, what time is it? And then knowing what to do based on what time it is.
That's true. That's true. Because we need observability in our daily lives. It's not just tech, which I think is kind of it's one of those things where you're like, duh, but also we don't talk about it. It's like, it's always the simple things. It's always the obvious things that we don't necessarily think about.
I love a dashboard for my life.
Well,
yes.
But I think that's so interesting. We have dashboards for literally the dashboard comes from the thing on the car.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, you're
right?
So right.
Right. Dashboards have always existed. Like if you ever sat down the console of any equipment, of any kind, or anything like a power plant at a car, at a anything. There's dashboards, there's gauges, there's dials, there's things that tell you the state of various things that you need to know. And sometimes there's even places for you to react, to do things on those things, right? It's funny, you look at the some of the greatest engineering stuff we have accomplishments in the world is, look at mission control, right?
Yeah.
There's observability posts everywhere. Everyone has their own little section, and they've got metrics and telemetry and all this other kind of stuff like that. So observability, I mean, you look at sailing ships from way back in the day, and they've got a crow's nest up there. So someone climbs. Why? For observability. So they can see.
That is so true. That is so true. And even on our phones, right? Like anytime we add widgets to our phones, being able to see what time it is, what the weather is. I've got an Apple Watch, so then I can see what my activity
fitness stats
level is. Yeah, fitness stats.
Yeah.
That stuff is awesome.
Well, we've all got families that have children. Do you have the bulletin board that has the calendar, and it has the appointment this, and it has somebody's card pinned to it, and it's got keys, et cetera, et cetera? No, just
I'm not
me.
that
Okay.
advanced. I just get calendar invites from my partner.
Yeah, we have a shared family calendar, and that's
so you guys don't have a hung up calendar, or did you never have one kind of growing up? Oh, we absolutely have a paper calendar,
no,
you write
never
stuff on there. How about
Never.
a whiteboard?
I have a whiteboard in my office, but we don't have a family whiteboard.
Oh wow. Okay.
My
All right.
kid,
see, this is
my kid would just draw all over that. That wouldn't survive.
Perfect.
My kid already
You have-
writes all over my whiteboard.
you get a long whiteboard, right? You get a long whiteboard. So anything kid height is the kid's part of the whiteboard, and everything adult height is everything you put everything else on.
Yeah, that's not how it's gonna roll. You both met my kid. She's a little troll. She is wonderful, but she is a troll.
Isn't she the editor on your podcast?
She is.
She's going to totally edit that out.
I know, yeah.
And the background that you see on this screen, that was all Hannah. But she will troll you, and it's a hoot. So yeah, I mean, she even wrote on my on my whiteboard the other day, "Buy me new shiny thing."
Yeah, but that's easily solvable. You're gonna go right down to the hobby store and get her some of the shiny plastic, fake gemstones. There you go.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, I control right back.
But like I said, so those little little station we have where it's you can see the date, you can see appointments, and stuff like that. Those little things are oh man, what have I got to do today? How's that? People's planners on their desks, actual paper planners, things like that. Those are all still forms of observability.
It's true. It's very true.
This is my planner.
My planner's all here on my lovely iPhone.
When things get to a point of intensity, when things are just a little too much, I just start writing everything down on sticky notes and slap on my keyboard or on my desk.
Ooh.
And then I start processing that way. I tried notebooks. I have too many, and it's a bad habit for me to just pick up one, start writing in it, and then that's the end of that because I park it somewhere. The only thing I've been
here's the thing. I have different notebooks for different things.
Mm-hmm. Oh damn!
And that level is it has helped me. But the other thing too is I am, as someone who's ADHD, I'm very screen dependent. I'm very calendar dependent. But also it keeps me less from looking at my screen, because then I will start to get distracted by something. So I will write things down with pen and paper. Right.
Oh, so, that's smart.
This and then that way it keeps me focused on the thing. And then I know okay, which notebook is what. So they're all either different colors, different shapes, different patterns, stuff like that. I've got 4 of them. But they're all distinct. One stays in my bedroom, right? Typically by the bed. That's my idea. Last house kind of, then I've got the one here at my desk, there. I've got the one that's in my main room there. And then I've got my travel, the small one,
That's so organized. I'm just too lazy, and I just put everything in my phone because I just can't be bothered to carry.
But in the end, what we talk about is you gather all that data in someplace like that, and then what do you do with it? Then
Yeah.
and that's the difference between, that's the thing that really makes observability, I think, in a practical standpoint. It's not that you just collect the data, right? You do something.
Yeah.
You
Well,
look
and
at
that's the
it.
thing, right? It's the do something. And that's why Hazel's definition is so like on the money, because it's like, okay, and what do you do with it? And I think, the interesting thing is, like, observability has become a part of our tech vernacular in the last several years, which I'm super excited about. It's really, I mean, the number of like observability startups, and just even like looking at open telemetry, the fact that like it's got the second highest contributions of any project in the CNCF, like it's this stuff is here to stay. It's not going away anywhere. But we always traditionally talk about observability within the confines of SRE, which makes sense. And to a lesser extent, although I think it's still part of it. Like also development, right? It's not so much like, because I mean, developers have that instrumentation has to happen somewhere, and it happens with developers. But even that conversation isn't as prevalent as observability being the SRE's domain.
But I think it's interesting because we talk about developers and how it really affects them, and then what's the first thing that some people are going to do when they talk about like what do you do as a developer? They're going to go and show you the GitHub contributions, right?
Yeah.
That little dashboard there is all observability, right?
Yeah.
They can say, what was your sprint plan? How are things you deploy? Like, there's so much observability. There's so much data that is observability data within the application development and deployment process that is not related to SRE. I'm just talking about like, when you go to do like a retrospective or your reviews or whatever, like, okay, well, what were your stats, right?
Yeah.
That's observability.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I guess it's kind of switching that like mental model, that we're doing observability. We just don't realize that we're doing it. I mean, even like as a developer, when you're debugging your code and you're like writing log messages like, did I get here? or some choice swear words because the code's not working. That is a form of observability, so that you can see like, is my code hitting the spot when you're doing like a debug trace. That is getting observability into your code.
I mean, if you think about it, like how many developers who work on CI/CD pipelines are painfully aware of how long their builds take?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what do you do with that data? Right.
Yeah.
You are collecting that data, and it can, hey, our build speed is this. Well, it affects this and this and this because we know it takes this amount of time. Like all that stuff, all those questions are answered. All that data, the data that you keep, even if it's in your own head, right, is still levels of observability, right?
Yeah.
The fact that you can present this data when it's relevant to people who it's relevant to, right? That's all we're doing. That's all observability is in the end, especially when we talk about how we do it in tech, right?
Yeah.
But it certainly extends just beyond that, right? Who here has ever done an expense report? Right?
Yep.
So, you go through and they want to know, okay, well, what did you spend and where did you spend it and what was it on and all these other key things like that. And somewhere somebody has an accountant and all these things go into various, all these accounts go into various buckets and they categorize the spend and what it was on and who spent what. And this quarter was on this, something like that. All that data is still observability.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then I to tie it into with what we're talking about today is, we have observability as part of our daily lives, but we don't have like a standardized format for all of this observability, right?
We don't.
No.
Not for our personal, not for like, I mean, obviously in like SRE and dev and whatever, like we have that now with OTel, but with other stuff, it's like still kind of a free for all, right?
Oh yeah. Think about like when we're talking about expense reports, like how many different ways are there? You got it in Workday, you got it in Concur, you've got it in Expensify, you've got it in this, and you've got it in that, and it's like 20 different ways, some more painful than others, to collect the exact same data.
Oh, so true, so true. Yeah. And then you're collecting the exact same data, and then wouldn't it be nice to collect it in the same way and then display it in the same way, because we have our standard. And oh my God, open telemetry is our standard. Surprise.
But that is the essence of it. Like, we have all this data can be standardized.
Yep.
Go ahead, Marina. I mean, I cut you off.
No, I mean, we have a way to standardize upon it, but how do we standardize on how it all looks to the everyday human that's not an SRE, right? Like, how do we visualize this in such a way that it's easy to consume, easy to view, easy to read? Look, my mom does not need to go and learn open telemetry right now, but she needs the ability to kind of correlate what she does with her taxes, with her retirement planning, with her day job, with what she does at home. She wants a way to correlate that. Can OTel actually do that for us?
Yep.
Well, yes and no, right? The standard itself, right, can show how it would be easy to aggregate, to emit, collect, and aggregate that data. But what Marina's talking about is all in the visualization layer, right? And that was the thing with OTel. OTel was supposed to allow folks to stop worrying about the standard for format, for emission, for collection, aggregation, and let all the differentiation be in the visualization layer, right? But it is true, right? Like we have standardized some of the other things data, like how do we, what's a clock? Like, how do we tell time? Right?
Yeah.
We standardized pretty much on the only real difference is whether it's 12 or 24 hours, and we can still figure that out.
Yeah.
But we've all standardized time. We've all standardized, well, we haven't all standardized how you measure distance and length and stuff like that. But most
that's
of
your
us
fault. I'm sorry, you poked the bear.
Look, the metric system has never gotten us to the moon. That's all I'm going to say. But
weak.
But there is a lot of standardization there, especially with scientific stuff like that. And there are common patterns that you could use when it comes to that visualization that we do. Things, people read clocks, people read, temperature gauges, like things like that that people have figured out are intuitive on how to display things, but we don't have a standardized way of collecting that data. Everyone is doing it differently.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the rub, right? Is everyone's doing it differently. And we saw it even like, in our little corner of the world, right? Like, before open telemetry, everyone was kind of doing their own thing. There were like, different vendor SDKs. There was the attempt previously with open census and open tracing, and thankfully there was the agreement to bring them together into open telemetry. And even, like, I'm sure that was challenging. We don't hear about the behind the scenes challenges that happen in bringing two open source projects together, but I'm sure there were.
Are you suggesting there's politics in open source, Adriana? That is This is breaking news.
Breaking news, I know. But it goes to show, like, the stuff isn't easy, but now we finally have like the means of achieving that standardization.
That standardization is crossing boundaries beyond cloud native. The other day, when I was looking for a bridge for something, you both worked with SNMP, I'm sure, like way back when the ops days, right? So I was looking for a bridge between SNMP and OTel, and there are artifacts and little droplets of this information and work being done to make that possible, so that our traditional routers and switches that we've messed around with for years, there's a way to OTelify it, if you want to call it that. And that's shocking to me, because in that world, there was no standardization. Like, SNMP was the broken standard, if you will. And then you had other technologies that would come out and help you map out, like things like packet flow or device discovery. And it wasn't consistent across the board. Someone would have to sit there and define it for every single vendor out there. And now it seems that OTel can standardize across that domain as well, like very much so, and make it easy.
I think back to working with the Elastic Stack, and one of the things that I loved about Logstash was that Logstash was like a universal interpreter. You had input plugins, output plugins, and codexes. You could take something from one format and run filters, do transformations, put into another format. And we deployed this at very large scales, across very, very large concerns, collecting terabytes of data a day. But that was the compute and the resources necessary to do that were in fact necessary because there was no standard data format. And I remember one of the first things that I liked about something like the beats format and then the collectors, as you could emit data and put it directly into Elasticsearch without having to do transformations in Logstash. You could eliminate the entire ETL portion of your stack because you didn't have to do transformation, right? And so the idea of being able to streamline and minimize resources between emission and aggregation of metrics data and observability data is really, really critical because it makes good data more approachable. It makes actionable data more approachable because you don't have to have the ability to change all these different formats into something else. And when you can collect all different kinds of data from all different kinds of emission sources and still have one standard format, it allows you to have access to so many more things.
Yeah, absolutely. It just opens up like a whole world to everyone.
New world.
Didn't know there would be singing on this, did y'all?
There's always a potential for breaking into song.
That's true.
Especially with Marino around.
What? How did I not know this?
Now everyone's gonna be asking Marino to sing, which is great. So.
What?
I don't sing.
Like
I karaoke. I mean, you gotta give me a mic.
Implies that you have some singing.
Yeah, there's actually a microphone directly in front of you right now.
not the same. Like, I need the lyrics in front of me too, and I need like
there's a screen directly in front of you that could have lyrics.
Oh, we're not karaoke.
Needs observability into his lyrics. Damn it!
Live stream karaoke one day. On Geeking Out.
All right, you heard it here first, folks. We're gonna do it.
Oh yeah, live streamer rookie.
what I was gonna say, I think it's that actually might sell. But what I think is interesting is talking about the various different ways that you access data is because we all used to know, like, oh, if we're running Splunk, we have to run it in this query language. If you're running, Elastic, you have to run this query language. Tableau had this query language. BI analytic tool X had all these other different types of things. And you had to have, and if you had to go and learn, if you had to get data or do, try and get observability into some things that have all these disparate data aggregation points, it was like, oh gosh, I have to learn everything, right? There's and so like vendor lock-in became a thing because like we're going to use this because this is the one we know. This is the one we have the plugins for, right? But extend it even beyond that. Like it's like, if you want to collect data from, your this IoT device or that IoT device, and they're in different formats, like how do you go through and now I got to write this, I got to write that collector, I got to do data transformation on this and on that. But if it's all in the same format, right, it makes it so much simpler for you to go to collect data and metrics from it. And as think about like I don't know if you two are into cars or not, but cars have standardized their data and computing formats a while ago, right?
Yeah.
It was OBD1 and then OBD2 and then 2 plus and so on. But you can go to AutoZone right now and get like a $30 reader, and it's going to be able to read the diagnostic codes off your car's computer because they have a standard format now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and even going back to the old car analogy, like you don't teach someone how to drive a Volvo or a Honda, you teach someone how to drive a car. You have that standardization even in how you operate a motor vehicle. And because of that, you can, you might have a Honda at home, but rent, a Peugeot in France.
Peugeot.
and it'll still be, more or less the same experience.
Steering wheel's on the wrong side of the car, though. If you're in Great Britain, I'm just there are exceptions to the standardization, and they're glaring.
That's true. But yeah, I mean, but all this to say that standardization matters, and we benefit from it at the end of the day. Now, I think it'd be interesting to discuss some use cases of both, like, because I think, you know, bringing OTel and observability into both like personal use cases, but also business use cases, because I see a lot of value in both. So I was wondering if we could delve into some interesting business use cases where we don't see open telemetry, but we could.
I think that example we talk about for expenses is a great one, right? Because a lot of every business runs on money in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But how do we collect the data on the expenses? How do we collect accounting data? In what format is it ingested, especially on something that has, you know, any kind of time series thing, like which paychecks, for example, can really be time series data. Like on this date, we sent out this much to this account, right? Over and over again, like that.
Yep.
You know, that can be a standardized format that can be collected in OTel and displayed and whatever, right?
Yeah.
You know, you've got things like your HVAC information, right? Your heating and cooling and water flows, your electric power meters, you know, all those things collect time series data that we use day in, day out. Like if you run a data center, if you just run, you know, if you run a real estate place that runs a building, right? And you want to figure out like a hotel, you know, you're trying to figure out, you know, how much is this stuff costing you? Like, how do you have observability into it? Do you just wait till you get your bill? That's actually what happens to most of us in our houses.
Yeah.
We have to wait until we get our power bill, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever had like an unusually high power bill once?
Yeah.
I know I have.
Yeah.
Or water bill.
Running.
Yeah.
And but then what does your power bill tell you what specific device or set of devices is consuming all the power? No.
Not that I know of.
Does the breaker panel? No, not unless one of them pops. But there's no insight. Like, would be great is if we had if we could get telemetry off our plugs, off the power outlets, that tells us this outlet right here is this outlet uses used a kilowatt today, which is crazy enough. But you know what I'm saying, like if we could have that kind of observability so imagine how much you could save on your power bill.
Yeah.
If you knew what was causing the problem.
Yeah, have that level of granularity, basically.
Yeah. And if we don't, like, sure, you do have to build some kind of collection tool in power, but imagine if it's just running regular OTel data and I can just pull it off, Raspberry Pi or something like that.
Yep. And then pull it into like an open source visualization tool and magic. Yeah. And then it fulfills the promise of Hazel's definition, where now you have the data and you can do something with it. You've asked your question, where am I using the most power? You get your answer. It's here. Great. Now I can take mitigating actions to reduce that consumption. Or it's like, oh crap, I didn't even know I had that running.
Yeah. And that's the thing I think a lot of us have had to deal with, like, or high water bill, trying to find where the leak is.
Yeah.
Totally. Things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the way you just phrased it, I mean, this morning we were doing some troubleshooting with OTel, trying to find out that one broken service. And the applicability in our real world is right there, right in front of us, where that one little outlet might be just burnt out or something, or that one little appliance that you have running is what's causing that huge electricity bill. And it's funny because there's just so much relatability into how we can tie these systems together. It's just, how do you convince people that have already built their metrics and observability for these appliances, these systems at home or wherever else, to conform to OTel or a standard like OTel?
I guess to a certain extent, it does start with like the tooling. Like in the same way that, I think OTel only is what it is in part because a lot of the observability vendors came together and said, okay, we're going to support this standard. Like, we have USB-C now because a bunch of computer manufacturers were like, okay, let's do this. But you can't, without that agreement, it's going to be a free-for-all. And I think, yeah.
Well, like you said, making the business case for it is the hard part. But because for a while there was a lot of if we have our own standard and we get everyone to the standard, then we'll make all the money. But something it's hard with software when there are open source alternatives, right? When Splunk started losing market share to other open source vendors, maybe having something where we don't have to have the big expenditure into research, development, maintenance of our own query languages or our own data formats and stuff like that, and we can pull into one standardized one and then spend all our efforts in the visualization layer and other optimizations. It actually makes sense.
Yep.
But again, it takes some time. You look at something like Linux. Right now, how many folks have Linux distributions, or how many have had them at various points? But before that point, everyone was making their own operating system, and everything was closed proprietary. And then even now that everyone has decided on a standard, there is still so much room for differentiation between them that it's not like choosing to be a Linux distro vendor means that you're capped in your options.
Yeah.
It's just the standardized formats are where we are. Look at VHS.
Yeah.
CDs, all these things that we do for media formats day in, day out routinely all have regular formats. The software on your iPhone, something for Android, they all have standardization. Data is kind of the wild, wild west for it, though. Like you can just because and it's not necessarily his fault. There are so many different types of data, so many ways to generate it, and so many ways to store it, so many ways to aggregate it, just based on different use cases in our lives. That of course it's going to be hard to come up and decide what's standard and all, but you can get some momentum, like the tech industry has done with OTel, with a lot of stuff like that, with a lot of stuff within our segment of the tech industry. But expanding this out to hardware tech has been a thing. So like, your server vendors and PC vendors, they emit stuff now in OTel, which is great. But now let's move into like things that aren't necessarily PC tech, like our watches, our phones, aircraft, cars, satellite equipment, like all these other things.
Yep. I mean, even you mentioned phones, and I always think back to like the the on the iPhones, the blue bubble versus the green bubble, and I've noticed even recently, like in the green bubble now, there's I think like a new data standard. RCS, yeah, and I'm like, finally, like we have.
And now you can see who's read your text messages.
Yeah, that's right.
It's still
like we finally have like more visibility with the green bubble people.
It's still green, but now we can send full emojis and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. So I mean, just that even something like that fully underscores the importance of that standardization. I wanted to post on here a question from someone here.
Hey, Mark.
Mark asks, if I already support a Prometheus endpoint, what's the distance to OTel? And as an ISV, how substantial is the likelihood of being supported? Thoughts?
I mean, the second part of the question is that an OTel endpoint is going to be very likely to be supported, because all the vendors you're talking about now support OTel. They all contribute to OTel. They all emit data in OTel formats natively now at this point. So the support is there. As far as for the specific service that you do, my principal architect answer is it depends. Now there is, it's going to depend, like all right, how hard is it to change something from a Prometheus endpoint to an OTel endpoint? You could actually probably have something that will do a conversion after the fact right now already, that will take data emitted in Prometheus and throw it into an OTel format. So you don't have to necessarily like reinvent the wheel here. You can just throw a conversion in on top of that. But if you did want to support that natively, I can't imagine that it's going to be extremely difficult. And there are probably either folks or services there that can help you with that. Maybe I don't want to say ask Chat GPT, but
But I will say, actually, I can tell you that there is a Prometheus receiver in the OTel collector. So absolutely,
really?
you can absolutely ingest Prometheus data, and to the point now where you can ingest Prometheus data without needing to use Prometheus. So if your backend supports OTel metrics, you ingest the Prometheus data and pop it into whatever, and backend supports OTel metrics, and boom.
There you go.
That's interesting.
Yes, magic.
Seems like OTel is doing a number of different translations, I guess, in that situation, right? So you just don't even have to redefine your backend code if you didn't need to.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the beauty of the OTel collector, and why I love it so much is because you can ingest data from multiple formats, because it's basically a data pipeline. It's ETL. It extracts data from endpoint or wherever, transforms it, and then exports it to wherever you want to send it to. So, the sky's the limit, really, and that's honestly why I love the collector.
So much.
There was a comment, a clarification. Generate Prometheus data, not consume. Yeah.
Yeah, you generate it. Like I said, you can now pull it right into the OTel collector. So.
Yeah. And there's also a Prometheus exporter. So if you want to export Prometheus data to Prometheus, you can also do that. So.
But who wants to do that?
My question exactly.
No, it is so weird. It is so weird for me to now discuss Prometheus as a legacy system.
Oh yeah, that's true.
But I mean, because I remember when Prometheus was like, I remember when Nagios was the legacy system. But also I miss Nagios. If only for the Firefox plugin that was so helpful. I think everyone knows.
I saw Nagios somewhere. I feel like I saw them like at a conference a few years back, still hanging around doing their thing.
Was it a mainframe conference? Was it?
Oh, Tim.
Oh, Tim. I wanted I wanted to touch upon another use case that Marino and I talked about during our Observability Day talk, which is applying for a job. The job market is interesting these days, and a lot of people applying for jobs, and it's. If you've ever applied for a job, and hands up if you have, I'm sure everyone here can relate. It's a bit of a black box sometimes. You apply for a role, and then you have no idea where you're at in the application pipeline. And not only as the candidate can the experience be improved, I think having that observability into internal observability of the hiring process for the people doing the hiring, I think could do a world of good, because I think sometimes, life happens. If you're a hiring manager, that's not really like your full-time job. You are hiring people to work on your team, but then you've got to manage your team. So taking the time to review resumes and conduct interviews and make sure that the candidate passes to the next stage of the pipeline is time consuming. And I think sometimes we don't realize how many gaps there are between interview stages, because our lives can tend to be very busy. And so I think having that observability into the hiring pipeline, where you basically represent each stage of the hiring process as a distributed trace. The hiring process is a distributed trace, and each stage is a span. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh, now you have visibility into the steps of the hiring process. And on top of that, you can look at the duration of each span and see like where you're like getting stuck, right? And then you can get, logs can be used to represent like comments at each point in the interview, both from like the interviewer and the interviewee. You can use metrics to, as I said, like get the duration of the span in each step, but also understand like how many candidates have gone from one stage to the next, so you can see like kind of what your acceptance and rejection rate is, or how many candidates ended up rejecting the offer. That could be another interesting metric. And I think in doing that, it allows the people responsible for hiring to improve the process internally, and therefore it improves the process externally as well. Because then it becomes a more streamlined process for the candidate. Because unfortunately, a lot of candidates end up getting ghosted, either on purpose or by accident, and it's a very frustrating process. It's a very frustrating experience for a candidate. So just these little things can help make life better. Any thoughts, comments?
Oh, well, I think it's interesting because I feel like the largest kind of black hole for insight and data comes from the candidate side, right? And so often I think a good use case for ingesting kind of data like that would be on like, I'm going to a company has one position open, right? So I'm going to take 10 resumes. I'm going to craft them differently, right? Tag them, so I know that which resume is whatever, right? And then submit them to the same job, right? Same person, but you change some details. And they've done this with like blind studies before, resume study, with like seeing which one makes it through the AI filter, and then which ones, and then what they have in common, and then how long it takes to get, or how long it takes to get rejection, stuff like that is a good. I would love to see data on that submitted, but like, let's say like, I don't know, like Glassdoor does that, and say, then they give you like, roles for this thing tend to 10, we found that, roles for this title, right, across this swath of companies, you tend to get more responses if your resume includes this or this or this or this, right? Having insight and data into that would actually be useful. Not only for the candidates, but hopefully also for the companies that use AI to filter out resumes, to filter, to say like, oh, these filters are actually not working that great.
Right.
Yeah.
So not only using OTel to standardize within an organization, but across organizations. So then we can pool that into like an even bigger data set and have an understanding. Yeah.
And
that's great.
And that I think is the true magic of OTels, because it's easier to standardize within an org than it is across orgs. And so having one place that can aggregate standardized data and then run, get information from it, is far more useful than having one organization that can standardize its own data, right? Because you get a much larger sample. It's like, like the whole notion of behind a data lake or data ocean or data water planet. I'm not sure which one we're on right now. Is that the larger pools of data, so long as they're in the common container and can be, a common format, you can get a lot better insights into that.
Yeah. And then it can give us insights too into like, I always find like one of the stressful things is playing the salary game. Wouldn't it be nice to have like some actual accurate salary data, so we're not playing games? Because I always find that very stressful when it comes to like negotiating an offer.
I mean, this is not. I don't think this is the HR episode, the hiring recruiting episode. But yes, I agree.
Marino, any thoughts or any use cases you'd like to highlight?
So I can't get into too much detail about it, but I kind of talked about it at KubeCon. If you want to go, I don't know why I get my phone calls in randomly. Why didn't I put on D&D? I don't know. Anyways, so I talked about it at KubeCon. So if you want to go check it out, you're more than welcome.
Zach.
Yeah. So there was a a particular project I was working on with respect to air traffic control and being able to correlate that data back into the ops world, just to be able to achieve better response times and whatnot. So all in all, to say that you could potentially ingest some of this telemetry data in the form of open telemetry and feed it off to a common dashboard that other teams can take advantage of, have visibility into as well. And it's kind of shocking that there is this separation of how these actions are performed. Like, you've got one team that's focused on air traffic control, and they have their own standardization and their own dashboards that they use to make sure that all the flights get in and out and take off at the right times. And then when problems arise, well, there is a translation layer, and it happens to be humans. Something happens, and then a series of tickets are opened up, right? It's not an immediate, I'm going to call IT and open up a ticket, but a series of tickets are opened up before it even gets to the technical team for them to troubleshoot. It's not like we're running Kubernetes on board or anything like that, but the idea is to marry those two together so that it's not dependent on a single individual or a team of individuals to translate what's going on, because sometimes that can get lost in translation as well. And what ends up happening is your issue isn't resolved and a flight can't take off for 32 hours, if you will, for something that might have been on the technical side that could have been resolved a lot faster. And it's amazing to see that there are airlines that are looking to address this very quickly and with speed. But at the same time, it's not like we can just go back in and modify these ATC style approaches for telemetry just like that right on the fly. There has to be some level of translation that is codified before this is even possible.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting when you bring about that thing of, like, instead of having to rely on one team to solve this, right? We can now rely on more teams to solve this, or more organizations, or something that could be in a different concern. Because I looked at, like, you look at something like something that has already kind of competing resources. A great example is the James Webb Space Telescope, right? The Space Telescope, people compete, right? They put in stuff to I want you to point the telescope at this position in space for this amount of time, and then run these things, right? And then get the data back, right? And that's a really cool way of doing it. And then what happens is that the team that asked for it gets first crack of the data, but that data is open to kind of everyone, eventually. But it would be lovely to have something where, the data is openly, if it's an open standard like OTel, because they're just measurements, is all it is. It's just measurements of radiation at different points of a band over time, right? That if this data was openly available in an open format, that anyone could go and visualize those things and things like that. And so many amateur astronomers have made so many discoveries of really important things that it goes to show that having access to some of this incredible data that's hard and expensive to collect, the more open you can make it, the more likely you're going to be able to find and discover new insights into it. So it's like, am I advocating for OTel on satellites? Yes. Like that would be a great thing if NASA or adopted OTel as a thing. Like, okay, or the JPL, whoever is in charge of putting satellites. So like, yeah, all the satellites are going to emit data in OTel, so that everybody can have access, and you can visualize it now however you need it to, because the data format is standard.
Yep. You're basically democratizing data, making it available to the masses, and crowdsource, right? Crowdsource discoveries, I guess, or observations.
And not only but the crowdsource the validation of discoveries too. It's not just I discovered it, but like, yeah, we actually went through and ran the same things, got the same things.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a really excellent point. All right. Well, we are coming up on time. We've got about 5 minutes left. So for anyone who's watching live, feel free if you have any questions. We are happy to take them. Otherwise, Marino, Tim, do you have final thoughts on this topic? What
My
look forward to, or
I would say that there needs to be plenty more advocacy in areas outside of our little CNCF or cloud native bubble, if you will, just to enable not only just the technological teams out there, but just other areas. Heck, I'm thinking about Govee and Philips, and they develop a lot of smart home devices, and some advocacy that way to really maybe help them understand how all of this can be married together is a way forward, right? Like, sure, we could talk about taking OTel to other domains all day long, but there has to be that next step.
Yeah. Tim, thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me the main thing I think about, especially when it comes to data, is the loss of it, right? The loss of access to it, right? I think one of the worst things that happened to humanity was the burning of the library at Alexandria, right? The loss of knowledge that had already been collected, aggregated, that can never be returned. And even now we see things where like this service gets closed down, this place goes out of business, like the web archive gets shut down, things like that. And when things that are proprietary, we all have things that are proprietary where the company goes out of business and now the thing doesn't work anymore. You don't have access to the thing or whatever, right? And I feel like having open data standard formats reduces the likelihood of us losing valuable knowledge, because there's no proprietary thing to decoding it or having access to it, right? The data is always there. The data is an open standard, so you can access it whenever. Just because we shouldn't lose knowledge, we should only gain it. We should only aggregate it.
Yeah. I really like that, and to echo Marino's point, I think getting buy-in from vendors that could benefit from this. And I think having conversations like these, I think really help, right? Because it brings awareness, because it maybe it's something that people haven't been thinking about. And so this starts to like put a little idea, starts to seed an idea. And to your point, Tim, I think making sure that we have these open standards, because otherwise, the data gets, never gets consumed. Right. It's like the other day I had this old Kindle, and the battery had died because I hadn't used it for a while and I wanted to start using it again. It used some like old ass, it wasn't even like a standard cable. It wasn't any of the USB whatevers that came before USB-C. And I straight up had no way of charging this Kindle, and therefore couldn't use it anymore. So it was like a useless brick on my nightstand, and I had to buy a new Kindle that used.
Who amongst us haven't? I was gonna say, who amongst us hasn't found their old iPod back then when it had a proprietary connector? And
I'm like, what was it? FireWire? Remember?
No, even before that, some 30-pin wide thing, like
that
MacBook
thing too. Yeah. No, it was the 30-pin on the one end, and then FireWire on that plugged into like the charging brick. So it was like, yes, I remember that. Vintage.
Proprietary formats, to try and go to vendor lock in have done a lot of damage. I think to consumers and to our collection of knowledge in general, and I would love to see less of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we're moving in the right direction. Amazing. Well, I think this wraps us up. We are at time. Thank you so much, Tim and Marino, for joining today. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who took the time to attend this live. And for those who attended live, tell your friends. Recordings are available on YouTube and LinkedIn. And I'll also post the MP3 on the Geeking Out podcasting stream. So wherever you stream your podcast, you should be able to find a recording of this episode as well. Thank you once again to both of you.
My pleasure.
Take care,
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
All right. Peace out and geek out, everyone.
Take care, everyone. See ya.